I think somebody lives in my house." I had heard my friend make that remark several times when the topic of haunted houses or spooky things would come up in conversation. She didn't believe in ghosts, and besides, her house was brand new when she and her sister moved into it. Why would it be haunted? A Native American burial ground? A Civil War massacre? Maybe her sister was torturing and murdering people in the attic? Our friends would always throw out ideas before someone would roll right on to the next point of conversation. I never paid her comments much attention. I'd spent a lot of time in her house. I'd even spent the night there a few times when I was a little too tipsy to drive home. I never got anything but a warm and cozy vibe from it. It was a lovely, well-maintained ranch-style home. She and her sister had painted the rooms in beautiful earth tones and decorated it in a rustic fashion. My friend loved lights, so there were lamps, firefly lights, and light-up signs everywhere. This house was not a creepy house. So, when she asked me to come by and feed their dogs and water their plants while they were away on vacation, I didn't hesitate to say yes. But oh, how I wish I would have. They left on a Saturday and had told me not to worry about coming by that day. So I stopped by the first time on Sunday afternoon on my way home from church. My friend had given me the key before she left, so I went right on in. Their black lab, Rocky, met me at the door, seemingly happy to see me. I loved on him for a few minutes before going into the kitchen to grab the dog's food. What should have been the first red flag greeted me in the kitchen. One of the cabinet doors was wide open. Funny, I thought. The dogs must have pulled it open. I grabbed their food and filled the bowls in the hall before putting it away and firmly shutting the cabinet door. I figured I'd better put something in front of it so they couldn't get it open and get to their food and make themselves sick. I grabbed a chair from the dining room and put it against the cabinet door. That ought to do it. Now for what should have been the second red flag. I grabbed the spray bottle from below the kitchen sink and headed over to the window to begin watering. I noticed, though, before I began to spray the flowers, that the soil already looked damp. I touched it lightly, and sure enough, it was. They must still be damp from where she watered them yesterday. Common sense should have told me that plants watered Saturday morning and left in a sunny window all day wouldn't still be wet Sunday afternoon. I walked around the whole place to find all of the plants were still wet. Well, okay. One last thing for me to do. I decided to hang out for a little while and give the dogs some company. I had nowhere to be for an hour or two, and I knew my friend wouldn't mind. I plopped onto the couch next to their big, lazy pit bull body and turned on the TV. Red flag number 3. As the black screen faded, I realized Netflix was still on the TV, on the select screen. It was like she had turned it off in the middle of looking for something to watch. It was strange, but I didn't pay much attention to it and turned it onto a local news channel for some background noise. I spent a good hour playing with the dogs before I headed home. That night, I spoke with my friend who informed me that she had seen me playing with the dogs when she checked her security cameras and thanked me for giving them attention. She had told me previously that they had cameras in the house, but I still felt a little uneasy knowing she actually checked them. I told her about the cabinet door, and she let me know that they did that often if they were left alone for too long, which made me feel a little better. I headed back the next day around noon. It was my brother's day off, so I took him with me. I figured he could play with the dogs while I watered the plants. This time, Rocky greeted me on the back patio. He looked agitated, and it didn't take us long to realize that the doggy door had been blocked by something, keeping him from getting back in. I unlocked the door and pushed it open to find that one of the stools they kept in their entryway had been knocked over and pushed against the door. Body must have knocked it over. My brother and I agreed. He picked up the stool and headed into the kitchen to feed the dogs, while I grabbed the spray bottle off the coffee table in the living room and watered all of the, now dry, plants. I finished in the kitchen where I filled the bottle back up and set it on the counter. I reminded my brother to replace the chair against the cabinet where I had put it so the dogs couldn't get to their food. There wasn't a chair in front of the cabinet, he said. Yes, there was. I put it there yesterday." "Well, they must have pushed it away too," he replied as he put another chair against the door. I suddenly felt uneasy, remembering my friend's quip about someone living in her house. I headed to the living room and turned on the TV, unsure of what I would do if it had been on something other than where I left it. But there it was, still on the local news. I breathed a sigh of relief. It's just the dogs. They're so energetic, they're just knocking things over. Though, I really wasn't entirely sure. We didn't stay as long on this day as I had the day before. We left soon after. I met up with some friends for dinner that night, and after a little while, the conversation turned to my house-sitting job. One friend remarked we should throw a party while she was out of town. Another asked if I'd checked the attic to see if her sister was a murderer. Our best friend, though, asked if I had heard any of the noises our friend claimed to hear. She always says she hears footsteps, like someone walking about her house at night. She told me once she swore she heard the cabinet doors open and close. This made chills run down my spine. I know she's mentioned someone living there, but I just figured she was joking or being paranoid. I don't know. I've never noticed anything, but she said she'll wake up sometimes to find dirty cups that she didn't think was there the night before, or her computer left on Spotify or Netflix when she was sure she shut it down. She's even said there's been weird things on her previously watched on Netflix. I didn't hear any more after that. My ears were ringing too loudly. Cabinets open, Netflix playing. What the actual fuck? It still wasn't enough for me to conclude someone else was living in her house, but it certainly shook me. Something was obviously off in that house. I had planned to stop on my way to work the next morning, but I overslept and knew I didn't have enough time. This meant I would have to stop on my way home, in the dark. Dread filled me the entire day. I had never felt in danger or even uneasy in that house, but now, the last thing I wanted to do was be there at night. What if she's right? What if something is there when I get there? What if someone is there? I tried to push the thought from my head. My friend was a smart girl, but she was paranoid. I knew that, and now I was getting paranoid for no good reason. No one was living in her house. I hope. It was 8 in the evening when I finally got to the house. The sun was setting on the countryside, and I knew it would be dark within the hour. The wind was beginning to pick up too, as a cold front brought a storm into the area. I knew as I pulled into the drive that I needed to get in and get out as fast as possible. There was no point in hanging around. I could hear the dogs barking as soon as I got out of the car. This should have been another red flag, but I chalked it up to them seeing me. As I walked in, I found both Body and Rocky standing in the hall, barking and growling at the darkened kitchen. My breath caught in my throat. I should leave. Right now, I thought. Oh, quit being a baby. There is nothing there. I stood frozen for a few seconds before lunging for the light switch and flipping it on, unsure of what exactly I would do if someone was actually standing there. But there was nothing. The kitchen was empty. I breathed a sigh of relief. Of course there's nothing here. I'm losing it. I grabbed the spray bottle off the counter and headed to my friend's room to start watering the plants. I had made it to her sister's room when my phone began to ring. It was my friend. She was probably wondering why I was acting crazy, lunging through her hall. "Hello?" I answered. "Call the police right now. I just checked my security camera. Someone just crawled out from under my kitchen sink." A couple of years ago, I took a job house-sitting for a family friend. It seemed like an easy gig. Feed the dog, water the plants, and just keep an eye on the place while they were away on vacation. The house was out in the country, secluded and beautiful. It had big windows, a wraparound porch, and was surrounded by trees. Honestly, I thought it would be a peaceful, relaxing weekend. The first night went smoothly. I fed the dog, checked the house, and settled in with a book. The place was big, but I didn't mind. I was used to being alone, and I enjoyed the quiet. But that night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like something, or someone, scraping against the side of the house. I didn't think much of it at first. Probably just a branch rubbing against the wall, I thought. But then I heard it again, closer this time, and a low thump followed. My heart skipped. I figured I was just being paranoid, so I decided to check it out. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly made my way outside, the cold night air hitting my skin. The dog was silent, which struck me as odd since she usually barked at any noise outside. The flashlight's beam sliced through the darkness, and I scanned the side of the house. I didn't see anything. But as I turned to go back inside, I caught something in the corner of my eye. There, just beyond the porch, in the shadow of the trees, I saw a figure standing perfectly still. I froze. It was a man. At least I think it was. He was standing so still, it was almost like he was waiting for me to notice him. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette of someone wearing a dark hoodie. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me, but I felt like he was. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I ran back into the house, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. I called my friend who owned the house, but they were still on vacation, and there was no answer. I texted them about the figure, hoping it was some kind of mistake. The rest of the night was a blur. I stayed up, checking the windows and making sure the locks were all secure. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting. The dog was still quiet, which was starting to feel wrong. Around 4 a.m., I was exhausted. I sat on the couch, trying to calm my nerves, when I heard something I wasn't expecting. A soft scratching at the front door. It was almost like fingernails against wood. I jumped up, my heart pounding in my chest. I slowly walked toward the door, my hands shaking. The scratching stopped as I got closer, and there was a moment of silence. Then the doorbell rang. I jumped back, staring at the door like it might open any second. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to just bolt, but the other part told me to stay calm. I tried to look out the peephole, but I couldn't see anything. I took a deep breath and stepped away from the door, trying to think logically. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. I grabbed the dog's leash, hooked it on, and decided I needed to get out of the house for a while. I'd walk around the property, keep the dog close, and just get some air. As we stepped outside, the cold night air hit me again. I walked quickly, trying not to look over my shoulder. The scratching at the door was still on my mind. Then, as I rounded the corner of the house, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. A set of fresh footprints in the snow, leading straight to the back door. I had just walked out the front, and those footprints weren't there before. They were too perfect, too recent. The footprints stopped just in front of the door. No sign of anyone around. No trail leading away. Just footprints. I stood there frozen for what felt like forever. Then, I heard the crunching of footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed the dog and ran back into the house, locking everything behind me. I stayed up the rest of the night, the house feeling like a prison. When my friends returned, I told them everything that had happened. They were confused, but assured me they'd had no one come over while they were away. They checked the security footage, and everything seemed normal, except for one thing. The camera by the back door had been covered. No one knew who did it. But I'll never forget the feeling of that man standing in the trees, the scratching at the door, and the fresh footprints leading nowhere. I should have known something was off when I got the job so easily. The ad was simple: house sitter needed, generous pay, short term. The owner, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, was an elderly woman heading out of town for a few weeks to visit her sister. She wanted someone to watch her house, nothing more. No pets to take care of, no plants to water. Just stay in the house and keep an eye on things. When I arrived, the house struck me as strange. Not in an obvious way. It was well kept, clean, and smelled faintly of lavender. But there were rules. Mrs. Carter handed me a small, handwritten list before she left. Lock the doors and windows before sunset. Do not go into the basement. If the phone rings after midnight, do not answer it. You may hear footsteps at night. Ignore them. She must have noticed my expression because she smiled and patted my arm. "Old house," she said. "It creaks. Don't let it scare you." I should have walked away right then. The first night was fine. The house was eerily quiet, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The second night, I heard the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, moving down the upstairs hallway. I was in the living room, watching TV, when I heard the faint creak of a floorboard. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was the house settling. That's what people say, right? But it didn't stop. I muted the TV. The steps paused, then resumed. Slow and steady, like someone was pacing back and forth just above me. I wanted to check, but the thought of going upstairs made my skin crawl. So I sat frozen until the footsteps eventually stopped. The third night was worse. Around 2 a.m., the phone rang, a shrill, piercing sound in the silence. I stared at it. The rule flashed in my mind: do not answer the phone after midnight. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it rang again, and again, and again. I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the receiver, my heart hammering. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. A voice whispered, "You shouldn't be there." Click. I barely slept. The final night, I made a mistake. I went into the basement. I don't know why. Maybe exhaustion, maybe frustration. Maybe some stupid part of me just wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing to be afraid of. The door was old, the handle stiff. I flicked on the light and took a few steps down. The basement was wrong. The air was thick and damp, and the light bulb overhead flickered. Against the far wall, there was a single wooden chair, and someone was sitting in it. Not moving, not breathing, just sitting there. I bolted. I didn't pack my things. I didn't leave a note. I just grabbed my car keys and ran. The next morning, I called Mrs. Carter. She answered on the first ring. I tried to explain, tried to ask who, what, was in the basement. She sighed. "I told you not to go down there." Then she hung up. The house is still there, still sitting at the top of Sycamore Hill. Every now and then, I check the ads. It always needs a house sitter,